the number one guy, which we'll start here with, is Yaxel Landenberg. Borg, I should say. He's committed to Michigan, but he's going through the draft process. He's a guy who I believe would probably go in somewhere in the realm of picks 20 through 30. But he has a really tough decision to make. I know he's came out and said that he's leaning towards Michigan 60-40. Since then, he's came out and said it's a lot closer than that now. But again, a really unique situation that he's in where he's going to be making a lot of money in Ann Arbor if he goes to Michigan next year and put Michigan in a chance to compete for a Big Ten title and make some noise in the NCAA tournament. But if he doesn't, then Michigan's kind of in scramble mode. If we're being honest, their roster isn't all too great without Yaxel. So definitely a decision that's going to have a big impact on that program. Josh, I'm going to ask you, if you're advising Yaxel, what do you tell him?
I mean, according to what he has told us, it's a 60-40 decision on returning to college versus going into the NBA. And I might flip it a little bit. I get it that he has a great opportunity to jump into the lottery next year. But at the same time, it really depends on who and what you want, both from the team that you're going to get drafted by, but also the team that you're leaving. And, staying at Michigan is not a bad idea. Keep in mind his original university, UAB, high mid major, but just not really something like a Michigan. He has Dusty May as a great coach. You've seen how Danny Wolf was transformed into a very likely lottery pick. There's a great reason for him to stay. And he could definitely get enough money to overprice a rookie contract from really any team. I don't know what team is really looking for him, but his draft combine looked great. He was taller than expected. He played better than expected. He fit really well. I mean, the guy can definitely fit in the NBA right now. I think it's definitely a coin flip, but I definitely see where he's coming from. Personally, if I were Yaxel, I would probably go to the NBA because it's just probably the best choice to do it now than to take the risk. But at the same time, there's no shame in coming back. I mean, there'd be a lot of happy Michigan fans that would buy your jersey and fill up your NIL deals in an instant.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough decision that he has to make. There's no guarantee that you're going to be picked in the same spot if you come back to school for one more year and enter your names to the draft the following season. And if we're being honest, he probably is going to go in the first round right now. I have a tough time seeing him falling out of the top 30. Of course, there's always a chance that happens. I personally don't see it. I think a lot of GMs believe he's going to go in the round of 20 to 30. Now, I know he's come out and said that he didn't choose Michigan because of the money. He chose it because of player development, the coaches, and how much he really trusts them, trusts Dusty May and his staff. Now, let's be honest here. The money is a factor, whether he wants to admit it or not. He's probably going to be making like 3 to 4 million in NIL next season. But yeah, I mean, you do have to take into account that he really does trust Dusty May and the coaching staff at Michigan. And you have to look at what they did. You mentioned Danny Wolf, Josh. Danny Wolf was a guy at Yale who, let's be honest, if you weren't an avid college basketball watcher, you probably didn't know who he was till this past year, where he balled out of Michigan and played himself into being probably a top 20 pick in this year's draft. I think if you're Yaxel, you take a look at that and see, hey, I'm valued at a first round pick right now. If I come back and have a really, really good year where I reach an All-American status, try to win a Big Ten title with Michigan, make some noise in March, I could play myself into being a lottery pick next draft. And I think that's the best thing for him to do. Come back, prove that you can play at the high major level, which we haven't seen you done yet, which I definitely think he's going to be able to do. He's definitely in the running, I think, for preseason Wooden Award. In my eyes, he's definitely the long up there with the likes of JT Toppin and Braden Smith, in my opinion. And I definitely think he's going to ball out in Ann Arbor next year if he comes back to school. So if I was him, considering the bagger to be making an NIL money, the chance for player development with that coaching staff, and just the ability to win at Michigan, a program that's kind of on the comeback right now. Dusty made a really good year this past season in his first year at Michigan. He's definitely building on that. And you come back, you got a team that's really going to need you, and you're going to be the go-to guy. So I don't see why you don't come back.
No, I 100% agree. But, it's definitely his decision. Honestly,
Right.
it's
Right.
really any major player's decision. I mean, We've seen this before a ton of times. Caravan was one of the bigger guys last year who was considering it, came back. He actually did it again this year. So I think that's very entertaining to see that. And I think big talk here is how NIL is giving players the opportunity to have almost a free year in coming back because they can make the money that they would make in the NBA and then go
Right.
into it anyway the next year. Because, 5, 10 years ago, we wouldn't have this discussion about if Yaxel would go to the league or not. Yaxel would not have even transferred. He would just went straight up through
Yeah,
UAB.
exactly.
Caravan would have left. We would have seen guys like Boogie Flan leave. Most of the guys testing would have just ended up going, and even if they don't get drafted, an undrafted free agent still a better option than an additional year in college that probably won't result in you being drafted again. So if you're going to ask me, big talk right now is just if you can offer the money, then there's no need to ever leave.
Most definitely. I mean, that again, like we've talked about so much on this podcast, and anyone who covers college basketball has talked about it. NIL has completely changed the game. It's made it so that some of the household names, the big name players in the sport, come back for another season instead of going pro. Maybe too early. I think it does a lot for player development. I think it does a lot for the sport too, getting more people to continue to return and watch their favorite players play. So we mentioned Yaxel Landenborg having major implications surrounding his draft decision. The rest of the guys on this list, really no different. I think really big one. Next name I want to throw out there is Darrion Williams. Obviously played at Texas Tech this past year, was really good with JT Toppin and that crew. They went on a nice little run in the NCAA tournament. If he comes back, Texas Tech, I think, has a chance to be a top five team in the preseason in my eyes. And he is, I believe, in the portal, but he is heavily considering a return to Texas Tech if he does pull his name out of the draft. If I'm him, come back to Texas Tech. You're going to be playing with JT Toppin. I know you might not be the number one guy, but I think a lot of times sometimes it's better to play with the guy who might be getting more attention on the scouting report than you, as it's going to open stuff up for you both offensively and defensively. Texas Tech has made some nice moves in the portal. I would come back to school and I would run it back at Texas Tech if I was him. But of course, any program around the country would love to have a guy of that caliber, and he's a guy that's going to command a big bag in NIL. But again, he has a decision to make. Whether he stays in the draft or comes back to school. If I'm him, I'm coming back to school. Josh, I'll ask you, if you're him, what do you choose?
I think this is another, tough decision. Maybe not as tough as Yaxel. I think Yaxel honestly just has the hardest decision out of pretty much anybody, maybe besides such a coward. But I think for Watkins, I mean, Flannery decided, but I think the best option for a lot of these guys is to just stay. One more year doesn't hurt you, especially when you gain more money than a rookie contract. And you're starting on a team, you're getting a lot more name recognition, you get a lot more opportunities. I think it definitely allows you to play into a better spot next year. It works. It's bearing fruit, definitely. So, I mean, I think this really just goes for anybody we're going to talk about today, other than I guess really just Yaxel. Stay. The best option is just to stay.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest right now, there's probably only it depends. There's two and a half, three guys on this list that I think should go. One of those being RJ Lewis. I think RJ Lewis should go. I just think he's really done everything he can in college outside of advance far in the NCAA tournament. I mean, he was Big East Player of the Year this past season. Had a really good year at St. John's. Obviously, we know what went down with Rick Pitino benching him in the second round game and him deciding to put his name into the portal. I really think he put as a very, very worst case scenario option for him to have. I believe he's fully committed to the draft process. He played really well in the combine over the last few days. And I honestly think that he's a guy who some teams might honestly choose value him as being good enough to take in the late first round. And I honestly think he's going to be able to carve out a role for himself in the NBA. He has great positional size on the wing. He's lengthy with the long wingspan. He's an athlete. I mean, really talented athlete, and he's showcased he's a 3-level scorer. Needs to improve on the 3-point jump shot a little bit, just consistency wise. But I think he's an NBA player. I think he should stay. I just think at this point in the process, there's a lot of teams who, yeah, might be able to pay you the money that you're deserving, just considering the market that RJ Lewis is going to demand if you were to come back to school. But if we're being honest, I really don't think a lot of those teams are all too good or will be all too good next year. Just consider a lot of teams are kind of holding out to see if they can pay guys which they already kind of have their mind settled on. So if I'm RJ Lewis, I go to the NBA. I stay in the draft, keep my name in it. I know you as a pretty big St. John's basketball watcher. I'm curious as to your opinion on the whole RJ Lewis situation.
I'd probably also agree with you. I mean, he was something I've pretty much already listed off my brain. Like, I knew he was going to the draft long before he even made the decision. It sucks that it had to end that way, and that, if he did come back, which is not out of the possibility, I don't see him ever going back to St. John's, but there's a big open market for him. Florida talked about having him. I'm sure Kansas would love him. Duke probably would have open spots if Cedric Howard doesn't go. So he has places to go back to, but he is a first round pick. He is more of a convincing first round pick in my mind than a guy like Yaxel. And if anything, he can play his way into the late lottery if he really wants to. He's just a junior, so he's not like super old in terms of NBA standards. So I can definitely see him filing that line. That said, would love if he came back, but we don't live in fantasies around here. So
Yeah. Yeah. And to talk, kind of switch the narrative back to guys who I think should stay in school, Otega Oweh. I'm sorry. Just in terms of feedback, I've heard that NBA teams have put out about Otega. They don't value him as a top 40 guy. It's unfortunate because he is a really, really talented player, amazing college player. I just don't think that the consistency in the 3-point jump shot is there yet. I also think we need to see him prove it a little bit more and being able to execute Kentucky's offense more in the half court as opposed to last year where they were so reliant on their transition game and kind of shut down once things got into the half court. But you're coming back to a Kentucky team that's super talented. If you come back, they're probably top 5 preseason team. You have so many dudes who can go and make a play on their own off the dribble, which does concern me a little bit, but that's maybe a topic for another video in terms of having too many mouths to feed on that Kentucky team. But again, you're going to be the guy in Lexington next year if you come back. You're already proven you had that streak of, I forget how many consecutive 20-point games. But you're going to come back, maybe be, my pick for SEC preseason player of the year. Probably a lot of others too. And have a chance to be a first team All-American next year. Make a lot of money at Lexington and maybe add some, try to carve out a legacy as one of those guys in the illustrious history of Kentucky elites. But yeah, if I'm Otega Oweh, I come back to school.
yeah, no, I've personally, I don't know. I think Otega Oweh is worth a early to mid second round pick, and I think that if he does want to suck it up and go second round, I would do that. It's just hard because it's Kentucky. The roster spots fill very quickly. And while Oweh was a huge part of last year's team, and obviously there is that desire to reach past the Sweet 16, which I think they definitely can do this year. I don't know. I'm more actually leaning towards him staying in the draft. I mean, I think as we've learned recently, and if you're more of an NBA guy like I am, the second round is still very important. And there's a lot of guys every year that do fall into the second round that are still probably worth more than most first rounders. So I think Oweh is in that category in my mind. I just don't know if the combine showed his talents well. That said, definitely up to him. It's more of those 60-40, 50-50 decisions that we can see. But this is one of the few I would also say to stay in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely hear you out, what you're saying there. Um, I mean, again, you're not guaranteed to get drafted if you come back to school for another year. You obviously get a year older, which NBA teams don't like. But again, I just think Kentucky is going to be really, really good next year if Otega comes back.
Yeah, Otega Oweh would be probably the nail in the coffin for an SEC completely dominated
Yeah,
by Kentucky. Kentucky would be a top five team in
right.
an instant with arguably one of last year's best players in general on a roster at Lexington. I just don't know how else to put it.
Exactly. Yeah,
But
I know what you mean.
I mean, it wouldn't shock me. That's the most I'll say.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm there with you there for sure. And to stay in the SEC with these last few guys, Todd Pettiford's one. This is a guy who all year long I did not understand how teams were not valuing him as a lottery pick. I mean, I understand he's undersized. His combine measurement came in. He's what, 6 foot 6'1"? I forget.
Yeah, yeah,
I won't lie. I thought he was 6'2", 6'3". So that's definitely shocking to me and definitely concerns me a lot for the sake of his draft value. Just because that was a player that I loved watching this past year. I mean, so good. A guy from Jersey City. So I definitely have to, someone who lived in Jersey City for a long time, definitely have to give him his flowers for putting on for the city there. But yeah, I mean, again, he just so dynamic what he could do off the dribble and off the ball. But when he's kind of in the scenario where he is handling the ball and being the kind of go-to guy in situations this past year for Auburn. There's a lot of games, big games that Tahad showed up in that he won for Auburn. And I just think the shot making ability is there. And no matter how tall he is, I think he's worth taking in the lottery. And I know he has had a really, really good showing in the combine. I think he had a game with 25 points, I want to say. And I know teams are actually really starting to kind of turn their heads. It's kind of flipping the narrative around his draft stock. So I definitely think there is a good chance that Tahad can sneak into the late lottery, and if not, be a pick in between 15 to 20 at latest the 20 to 30 range. But I definitely do think he goes in the first round. While I would love to see him come back for another year of college basketball, I think he should stay in the draft. I think if he's, hearing feedback wise, he's going to be a guaranteed first round pick. I think you stay. Just because I think his shot making ability and just what he can do off the dribble, I think his game kind of is more suited for the NBA than it is college, if I'm being totally honest. You're also considering his production. Probably, I mean, it's tough because you would think it would go up with him being kind of the returning guy from this past year's Auburn program. But now you have to remember you have Keyshawn Hall there and some of the other JUCO D2 transfers that Auburn's picked up. It could have gotten a little bit crowded in the scoring column. But again, as much as I would love to see Tahad return to college, I think you stay in the draft if you're guaranteed to be a first round pick.
yeah. No, I couldn't agree any less. It's. I mean, the decision is just hard for a lot of guys nowadays. Like I said before, NAL makes the decision very open, and if you're not a top prospect freshman or a guy who's really blown up in 1 year, it kind of leaves you in a spot where you could come back. You're offered a bag. You're offered a starting roster spot with boatloads of minutes to play with, or you can take the what's now becoming a riskier choice in going into the NBA, which you might not start. You might not even be on the team. You might be in the G League for all you know for most of your starting years. And it kind of sucks because part of the I guess pride and joy of college basketball is watching these players go into the NBA, and to have that kind of be taken a little bit is a bit of a shame. But when once again, if your time isn't right, then there's now a far better opportunity to stick around. But I guess on the point you're trying to make, the Hod, I think the Hod should stay. I mean, his scrimmage was amazing. I mean, we've seen shorter players still manage to stick in. I mean, there's guys that just fill that role despite their height. I mean, Donovan Mitchell, he kind of has that like style of play that I can totally see him becoming. I don't know if he'd ever start in his rookie year, regardless of where he goes, but he's worth a first rounder. He is definitely worth a first rounder as of right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I do not understand how it took NBA teams so long to realize how much talent's there. And it makes you really wonder if the NBA teams really do watch college basketball or not, because I swear some of these teams, that their talent evaluation is terrible, if I'm being.
I've been convinced that they don't for years now.
Yeah, I mean, these guys bank so much on potential off tape that really honestly shows none. And a lot of these guys they bank on reaching a certain point, they just never get there. And I mean, you got a guy who's proved it in big games like Dahad. I'd say you take the risk on that over a guy who really hasn't shown you anything actually on film yet. And you're just banking on how much they could potentially do in the NBA, which sometimes it works out. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt there, but a lot of times it doesn't. But hey, that's maybe a topic for another day. I lied about the rest of the guys being the SEC. Have to talk about Cedric Coward. I know Josh has mentioned him a few times. He's the other guy that I think should go stay in the draft. I know there's some rumors that he could go in the first round, late first round. If that's the case, I definitely think he should go. But I also think very much, even if he is in kind of the 30 to 40, 45 range, even then, I still think he should stay in the draft just because I think a lot of what it is right now surrounding his name is he's had pretty solid showing at the combine. And he only played 5, 6 games this past year, I believe. And, he showed a lot of great film in playing in the WCC at Washington State. Um, and before at East Washington, I believe it was. But I'm kind of being a hypocrite here, but I know I just talked about teams banking on guys' potential, but I think a lot of what NBA teams are seeing with Cedric Howard is the ability for growth. With him not being too much of an older player right now, if he comes back to school, there's obviously the potential that he plays his way into being a guaranteed first round pick if he has a really good year in Durham at Duke for John Shire this upcoming year if he stays in school. But at the same time, again, you're not guaranteed to keep your draft position if you go back to school for another year. And I definitely think if he's guaranteed to go in the first round right now, he should definitely stick it out in the draft and just hope for the best. Just considering again, a lot of teams are banking on his potential room for growth right now. You come back to college, you lose a year of that, and teams are now going to have a full up to date year of film on you. So yeah, there might be some good in there, but there also might be a lot of bad, which I'm not saying in any way to slight Cedric Howard. He's a really, really talented player and a guy who I think fits perfect on Duke. And I think he's going to be awesome there if he stays in school. But if we're talking about him wanting to capitalize on his potential being a pro basketball player and making it to the NBA, I think he should probably go right now.
Yeah, no, he's once again he's a guy like Yaxel Landenborg that I would consider. I mean, Michigan and Duke are prime schools to want to stick around. And for Duke, he's their only real transfer.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes you wonder what Shire's doing. I mean, he is keeping the majority of his guys, but I just don't know. Like there has to be enough money to definitely pay for Coward to come back, but Coward's looking more and more like a first round pick, or at worst a late or an early second round pick. Which, like, if you're gonna get drafted in that 25 to 35 range, it might be worth considering that. But once again, his role on this Duke team next year would be huge. It would be probably I'm kind of forgetting. I'm blanking on the name now. Of course, Tyrese Proctor. Yes, it would be a lot like a Tyrese Proctor, where Proctor's probably going to get drafted in the first round as well. By the way, and he could have went the year before when he was in Baylor. Obviously, he chose not to and transferred to Duke. A good decision by him, but if anything, he can fill that like older, but not too old style of playmaking where he can guide the Boozer brothers and the younger players that are filling the role, because this team doesn't really have a lot of
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he really could end up being a juiced up version of what Sion James was this past year.
apparatus
Where
that Shire needs if he wants to get back to a natty. So I don't know. It's one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, no, I definitely hear your points there. Like I just said, I mean, I could see Sion. I mean, my mistake. Cedric being a juiced up version of Sion. Maybe the Michael Jordan of Sion James's, but of course in a much bigger role than what Sion was this past season. Just considering you're not playing with the likes of Cooper Flag, Con Knipple, Kaman Maluwatch, and Tyrese Proctor staying in the draft, I believe. But you're bringing back Isaiah Evans. And I'm sure, Duke, I know Cedric, he's communicating with the Duke staff. Duke knows where his head's at in terms of whether he's staying or going and what he's leaning towards. And I'm sure they're preparing for the very real possibility that he keeps his name in the draft and doesn't come back, and never plays a game at Duke. But like if he comes back, I think he's going to be really good at Duke. Like I've talked about in the video I made about his commitment to Duke, I think that fit is awesome. I think he's going to be great in Durham. But again, if I'm Cedric, I probably stay in the draft.